Hi, my name is John McFetrich, and this is a series on wrapping your mind around writing constraints. Is which are the way we implement auto layout on for our iOS applications, and and this is important only if you're interested in writing native applications for iOS. And it's if you're using Xamarin Forms, then it's not for you. Xamarin Forms, of course, are a great way if you have a really simple UI. However, in many cases we want to have a more granular UI. In which case we have no choice but to drill down and to use the native native iOS application. And when we make that decision, then we have to wrap our mind around auto layout. Otherwise, our job may become quite daunting. And I will first caution you by saying I'm going to use Visual Studio and I'm going to use the designer. However, if I was really doing this for a production application, I would not use Visual Studio for doing the layout. I love writing C#. I love the fact that I can use C# across multiple platforms. However, the designer in Xcode is really, really good. And I would really advise you to wrap your mind around it and to try and use zip. But if you're stubborn and you insist on using Visual Studio, I will show you some tricks. Now, first of all, I will show you why you need to wrap your mind around auto layout. So let's get started. First of all, I just want to show you some of the documentation that comes right out of the Apple developer site. And here is the anatomy of a constraint. And a constraint is simply a linear equation, because what we're doing is we're describing a relationship between two objects or multiple. In this case, I've got a blue and a red rectangle. And we just want to have an 8-pixel gap between these two. And we want this to be described through a relationship equation. And the way we do this is we have our red leading edge, and that leading edge is the right there. It's going to be on the left side of the object, and it is going to be equal to the blue trailing, which is going to be the right side of my blue object, plus 8 pixels. Now we could also have a multiplier here, and we can make this say 2, and so that would be 16. And of course, as we move around our blue object, we will move the red object. So I just want to show you a very simple example of why auto layout is important. I'm going to do my design against an iPhone 6, and we can pick 4s and 6 pluses and iPads. And this just means that we don't have to actually use the simulator to see what our design looks like. So the first thing I do is I just grab a simple view, and I'm going to drop it on my design surface. Now, of course, I'm connected to my Mac Mini. This is a requirement here for our development. Alternatively, I could be using something like a Mac in the Sky. And let's just make this as wide as my iPhone 6, and we'll go over here and we'll see. And we want to let's just give this a little background and make this red. Now, if we look at our layout here, we will see that in this case, our little view is 375 pixels wide, but unfortunately, this is fixed. And so it starts at 0, 0, or 0, 37, and because we're actually down from the top here. And we can move this up, but the width is most important here. So now, oh boy, this looks good, and if I ran it on my iPhone 6, it would look great. But if I took and I look at this on my 6 Plus, which is wider, oh darn, it doesn't fill my screen, because this is a fixed size and it's not going to adapt to the, and of course because it's not adaptive, and we look at it on the iPad, it doesn't even show up here. Don't know why, but trust me, the Visual Studio tools are highly suspect in when it comes to design. And there's just one of the many cases why I use Xcode for doing my design. However, let's keep on plugging ahead. And so this is just why we need to wrap our mind around this. Now, my first simple example, I'm just going to show how to play around with centering this button. And you think this would be pretty simple, and it is in Xcode. You just hit the align button, and you hit the align horizontally and vertically, and that's all you need to do. However, it's a little trickier here. The first thing we do is we think, I'm doing this again with my generic device, and it looks kind of centered here, and let's just move it down a little bit. But then we go over to a 4, and gee, we're already off the screen. So, and no surprise, because because it's all fixed. So, and let's go back to generic. And the way we try and do this is we double click and we get our constraint, and we grab the center, and we're going to align it horizontally, and then we do it again, because notice it's complaining, and we do it. So we should now have all the constraints. Remember, we need the position and the width and the height, and it's still yellow because there's a difference between our constraints and our view, and we resolve that by doing the update frames. But let's go over here and look what it did, and what our wonderful designer did. It didn't really, what we really want this number to be 0 in both cases for the X and Y. So what we do is we click here, double click, and this constant, I'm going to just take and make it to a 0. So there's no offset, and turn and then hit the button again, and layout, let's see, and then we should know 0, and let's for centering the Y, we'll do the same thing, so that we're now it's now it's 7, we'll make it 0. Now we look pretty centered here. Didn't have to do that, but it appears you do. So if we look on the 6, hey, we're kind of looking good. And the same thing if we switch into our 4. Now, as I said, it's so dead simple to do this in Xcode. The Visual Studio Designer, I think it's flawed, but we can skate around it. So as I was showing you why constraints were important, and let's just go back to that example to get started. And I should point out that I'm following pretty closely in an excellent tutorial on YouTube. It's called Auto Layout Tutorial in Xcode 8, and there is 3 parts here, and it's I don't see the guy's name, but it's called Magic Technology. So anyways, I'm pretty well following that. So we now have our view that on our generic mode fills, or the width fills, but we want to make this work with constraints. So we click. We're now in. We can add our constraints. We take first one I will apply is on the leading edge, and just move it to the margin, and I do the same for, and of course I'm using there are 2 icons here. I'm using one to the inside, and I take a gain in this for the trailing edge. Then we should have 2 constraints satisfied. And if you look here, showing my constraints, yeah, we're still missing the Y position and the height. And remember, I said you need all four. You need the X, the Y, the width, and the height. So now we will, let's click on here and get our Y, and we'll make it to the, just assume that there's a toolbar here, and this will turn blue when we're over one of the possible constraints. So we should now have that toolbar. And then for the height, let's just zoom in here and see. I'm going to grab this little thing here on the right, click on it, and choose height. So now our little rectangle is no longer yellow, and we should have all the constraints that we need. And just to prove this, let's go on to the 6th, and we're looking pretty good. And to the real test is on the big iPad, and yeah, it's let's just zoom out a little bit here. It fills it, and the same thing if we go back to our 4. So let's make sure we're in our generic view here, and I'm going to add another view, and I'm going to make it relative to that red rectangle. So I just grab my view, move it in here. Now I'm going to make this a little bigger. Let's see, let's make this, well actually let's do this through constraints. Now, first thing I want to do is change this background. Let's make this a green, and then we want to have this about 30 pixels from this red rectangle. So, and it's going to be anchored to this red rectangle. So if I move the rectangle, I will also move this because it's constrained relative to the red. So I'm going to take and make move and create my leading constraint, my trailing constraint, and then we're going to modify these. And we're going to make this one relative to the bottom of our top, and it's still saying we're probably missing one. It's still yellow. So what are we missing? Well, it's the height, of course. So again, we click on this, and so then we have where that height becomes a constraint. So now everything, the Visual Studio is happy, but I'm not quite happy with this. So I'm going to, now in Xcode you've got much more control over this, and this is a pretty to be kind limited solution. But let's just take this 125, and we're going to make that and change the leading to 30. So I'm always 30 from the my margins, and this should, yeah. And the same thing I'm going to do for my trailing. So now we're going to grab the trailing, and we're going to see our trailing is 195. And we're going to also make it 30. And there. So, and now whenever, let's just see how this works. If I now take my my top rectangle and I change its there should be a width constraint on here. Yeah, I'm sorry, height, and it's 128. So let's just make this make this 50. So it becomes dramatic, and so this now moved up because it was being spaced relative to that red rectangle. And so if we move this down to make this 350, then again we will shift. So it's the desired effect. Now this may not work so well on the 4, so let's make this back to 100. And now if we take a look at this on the 4, yeah, And again for our acid test on the iPad. And we're looking pretty good. So we've constrained this relative to another object, a pretty simple example, but again, the UI is more simplistic when you use Xcode. However, you can do it here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we want to center a view within this aqua view, and we're going to make it want to have it a fixed width and height, and that's going to stay the same no matter what device we're on. So let's just make this a little smaller, and that's a go into our and give it again our some color so it stands out, and let's make it blue. And I thought I said blue, but okay. So there we go. And now what I want to do is just I want to center this, and I'm going to make its width. It's going to be I want this to be square, so I'm going to change its width here to 70 by 70, and that's 70, and make its height the same. And yeah, so now and what we're going to add a height constraint, so it's always going to be 70 high, and it's always going to be 70 wide, no matter what device. And then now we want to center it, and so we grab our and drag from the center, and we move this on to, and we align this horizontally, and then we do it vertically. And again, I'm going to go into here because I don't like, I'm going to edit this and make this 0, and change the 85 into 0. Again, you get in Xcode, you never have to do this, and we're going to make this do the same for our for the Y, and it's going to we'll just make this into 0. Now, now if we take a look at this on our 4, let's see how we look. Yep, and we're centered, and if we look at our width here, it should be 70 by 70. And the same thing if we go over to the iPad and we look at the big iPad, it seems to be also centered. And if we look at its width, gee, it's still 70 by 70. So we've achieved that goal, and this whole thing. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add another view and drop it in here, and we want it relative to the purple one we just added, and we want to align it vertically within our containing azure or whatever shade of green this is, and you can tell I'm not great in colors. So again, we go in here, we change our our background to well, let's make it a gray, and now and we're gonna make this a fixed width. Let's make it 50 by 70 here, and so we're 50 by 70, and so now, and we want to move this and have it constrained relative to our purple. So we just drag it over, we see our constraint light up, we choose it. And now of course we have to add 3 more. Let's add the height and the width. And then we still have to have some positioning information, so I'm going to take and align this vertically, so that so relative to the x-axis. And now we'll go back in here, and because it probably did make that 0, it made it 2 for center Y, and So, well, just to be complete, let's just make this 0. And this should be, and now, so we should be aligned within our box, and we should be relative to, and we should move relative to this guy here. So again, if we check our different devices, we look at this on a 4. It's actually not going to quite fit because the 4 is so small. And when we look on the larger 6 Plus and on the iPad, then things look pretty good. So, and if I was really worried about this, I would do some more fudging there for the 4. But no, I hope this gave you some idea. But again, I have to emphasize, yes, you can do this, and it works most of the time. But I would really encourage you to wrap your mind around Xcode, because it is they've had so much more time to make this their tool perfected, and it's a really good tool. Thank you, and I hope these help. I'm also going to add a little appendix here to show you how to move things back and forth between Xcode and Visual Studio, because don't get me wrong, this Visual Studio and C# is a great solution, and I'm going to do all my programming I do in C#, and I get to use everything I do in the .NET world, which I love. And but it's, I guess, it's back like in the old Silverlight days when we had blend. This I look upon on Xcode as being my blend. So I'm implying that you should use Xcode, and of course that this also means that you've got a good interop between your Windows machine and your Mac, and particularly between Visual Studio in Windows and your Mac build server. And there doesn't, to edit the storyboard, though, there doesn't seem to be a great way to do it right now. And the way, and I put a post up on Xamarin, and I don't, I haven't gotten a response yet. But the way I now do it is I just, of course, I'm using get to do my source control. So I just from my Mac, I just download my solution, and from get, and then I've got Visual Studio for the Mac installed, and I just right click on my storyboard, and the storyboard is then opened up in Xcode, and then I'm able to do my work and save the storyboard back in place. It's not as seamless as it might be, but it works, and of course I get the added benefit. Everything is backed up in source control. I hope some of this helps.